Good morning, Dan and Amy. So Jim Comey was before the House Oversight Committee again yesterday. It was still sort of explaining why he chose not to refer Hillary Clinton for charges, but it was more specifically about these immunity deals that were being, as some have said, handed out like candy.
That's good.
And just the bizarre, unusual nature of the immunity deals as characterized by Trey Gowdy and others. Here's Charles Krauthammer's take on Comey's latest appearance yesterday.
Look, it looks awful. Normally you give immunity so that you can prosecute. You may lose the case, but at least there's not even a prosecution. The impression left is, and we probably will never know, it was understood, not said, not written, not emailed, but it was understood we were not going to indict the Democratic candidate for the presidency, and thus everything else followed. And the close aides are getting immunity as well. It looks very suspicious. I credit Comey's sincerity, but I don't know what role he played. The one thing I would say is that if she wins, I think it is possible that Obama will pardon the remaining high officials who are going to end up in office with her as a way out of this, because otherwise this could pursue her and pursue them into her presidency. Remember, Watergate came long after a re-election, so there's a fuse here that I think will remain lit otherwise.
It's an interesting observation, but I would think that if she wins and she has another Loretta Lynch-like attorney general, why would anybody have to fear prosecution? It would be more likely if Donald Trump wins and he names Rudy Giuliani's attorney general, and then all of these things for which the statute of limitations has not run, whether it's over at IRS or related to Hillary's private server,
I was thinking that too,
revisited.
Like, she has to win or she could go to jail.
Well, for more on this topic and others in the state of the presidential race, we're happy to be joined again by our friend Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. Byron, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, folks. Good to be here.
So how do you think the Jim Comey testimony and the back and forth over the last couple of days about these immunity deals for Clinton aides, which was also invoked in part during the presidential debate on Monday night when Donald Trump made the reference to her aides taking the fifth. How do you think this plays? Does this still have legs, or is it running out of steam with the help of the D.C. press corps that wants it to run out of steam?
Well, I mean, we're talking about it, but I think Comey's appearance did not get that much coverage, wasn't played that big, and I think that we could probably say, like a few other things, Trump did not make the most effective use of it during the debate. Unlike Benghazi, he actually mentioned it. Basically, her chief of staff got immunity, her lawyer got immunity, the guy who set up her email system got immunity, a top State Department official got immunity, and the guy who did the actual breach bidding got immunity. I mean, that's really extraordinary.
What about the person who destroyed the BlackBerries with a hammer? Did he get immunity too?
No, he actually testified, and he testified that he wasn't trying to destroy any information, that he made sure that all the data on the BlackBerries was transferred to the new BlackBerries before he destroyed the old ones. But that's been actually one of the enduring images of the whole thing. So I think you could probably say that Trump didn't make good use of it, and he probably will make better use of it coming up in the next debate.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me this is right where he needs to go, that Clinton Inc. is, a quasi-criminal enterprise. I mean, he calls her Crooked Hillary, so make the case. It's a quasi-criminal enterprise where she leveraged her public office for private personal gain, and that's why you've got all these immunity deals and whatever Jim Comey's clean bill of health is, kind of, sort of, you still have a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of hinkiness and a lot of kind of suspension of disbelief in order to believe kind of the innocent motives of all these people that have immunity deals.
And the bigger question for Comey as he appeared before the House and the Senate on Capitol Hill it was not, is Hillary crooked Hillary? It was, why did the FBI and the Justice Department do this? Why were you handing out immunity like candy, as Jason Chaffetz said? And I don't think he really answered that very effectively. When Ron Johnson, the senator, asked him, actually it was Ben Sass, the senator, asked him, why did you give Cheryl Mills immunity? He said, well, we needed the laptop. And then, which kind of begs the question, why didn't you just ask for it? But then you could subpoena it. I mean, you could make her refuse to give the laptop before deciding whether to give immunity. And it was pretty clear that Clinton and the contractors involved and her own team had some sort of joint defense agreement, which is what they did in the Lewinsky matter and also the other independent counsel matters in the 1990s with Bill Clinton's presidency. It was pretty clear, what has been going on here, and the difference between the independent counsel of the 90s and the FBI today is that the FBI basically gave everybody immunity. And so nobody gets prosecuted because they're all immune to prosecution.
But to make matters even more bizarre, if that's even possible, then Cheryl Mills, after getting granted immunity, then became Hillary's attorney when she was questioned by the FBI.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of that before?
And by the way, her attorney also, another attorney got immunity too, one who had actually overseeing the work of deciding what was personal and what was private emails. Comey was asked about this. He said, look, it's not the FBI's job to decide who represents somebody. But it seems pretty clear if you read people with experience in this, like Andy McCarthy, the former federal prosecutor who writes for National Review, so that, you don't want the separate targets of an investigation to be talking with each other and getting their stories straight.
Right.
And so you have, Cheryl Mills, who's actually a witness in this situation, now acting as the lawyer for Hillary Clinton.
Well,
it doesn't look good.
And there's one other matter too, and it wasn't brought up in the testimony, at least not that I saw from Comey, but the issue of President Obama's involvement. Because of the document dump on Friday that indicates that President Obama emailed with Hillary Clinton using a pseudonym, one wonders if there was any desire to protect the president in addition to Hillary Clinton.
Well, there's always a desire to protect the president. It's not as if the president has any sort of legal exposure that I know of, but it certainly sounds like he didn't tell the American people the truth when he was asked about this. When this whole story first broke, it's like, how did you find out about Hillary's secret email system? And his answer was, well, I found out on the news like everybody else. Then we find out he'd been emailing her. And then in this most recent document dump last Friday, we find out that he emailed her under a pseudonym. So it sounded kind of clear that he knew something funky was going on with Hillary Clinton's email system, which we all should recognize was created to avoid disclosure and avoid federal disclosure laws. It was to operate secretly and not have to conform to subpoenas and demands for information from Congress and the public. That's why it was formed, and the president sounds like he played a role in it.
We're talking to Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Byron, we're talking about an issue that may be raised in a more pronounced fashion by Trump in the next debate. One that was raised and batted back and forth, including with the moderator, Lester Holt, was the issue of street crime and, of course, the relationship between police officers and the body politic. And it seems to me that as you have more incidents with police, and now there's one in San Diego the other night, in addition to the data that comes out about the significant increase in violent crime in 2015 nationwide, particularly in places like Ferguson, Missouri, that this will be an issue that's revisited in that town hall format in a week from Sunday.
This is one in which I think Trump did pretty well. Actually, there was an exchange about stop and frisk, which is this controversial police program that was used in New York under Rudy Giuliani and Michael Bloomberg and ended under Bill de Blasio. But Lester Holt said it was ruled unconstitutional. And Trump actually said, no, and here's what happened. A federal judge ruled it unconstitutional as applied in New York, and then an appeals court stayed that ruling and removed the judge. And it remained in limbo until Bill de Blasio took over and mooted the whole thing by stopping the stop and frisk program. So it's much more complicated than the sort of never Trump talking point would suggest. And I would recommend that everybody read a piece by Giuliani, who again was mayor of New York during this massive drop in crime. Read a piece in the Wall Street Journal about stop and frisk. I think it was yesterday. It's called "Trump Was Right About Stop and Frisk," and I think he gives a pretty good explanation of it. And
it's not just the right about the kind of the legal standing, but the issue of the substantive impact. And this seems to me an area of contrast that really helps Trump. The idea, look, you've got Hillary Clinton for an apologist for Black Lives Matter with parsing language about police, and you've got Trump, rinsing and repeating the phrase law and order. That seems to be a real clear choice between the two that he wants to prosecute.
Well, it does. And, Ann Coulter, who is a huge Trump supporter, wrote a column today basically saying Trump wins when he talks about the issues and he loses when he talks about himself. And I think it's probably true that the law and order segment of Trump's presentation at the debate was fairly successful. I mean, obviously the country's divided on this, and Hillary Clinton has her supporters on it, and he has his, but he needed to appeal not only to his supporters, but hopefully some of those few people who are still undecided in this. And he was vastly more effective when he was talking about trade or stopping terrorism or law and order than he was when he was talking about his own taxes or the Miss Universe, for goodness sake, or other issues like that.
All right. He's Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. Byron, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, folks. Enjoyed.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.